why I did that. The audio's on the camera. Old David's Die Hard. Anyway, good morning. Welcome back. Hope everyone is doing okay in these challenging times. I think that's all I'll say about that. Right, so carrying on the little history lesson of my photography over at least the first probably 6-7 years of picking up the camera. Let's just jump straight in. Okay, so this is where we left things last time, my little looking down image. I really loved my Converse. I think I need to get myself another pair of Converse. I haven't owned a pair in a good number of years. Travel. Now, if you've kind of watched anything off our other channel, our travel channel, you know that for a very long time I love to travel. And of course, you take the camera with you. Was lucky enough to see one of the penultimate, is this STS 232, 132? Lucky enough to see 132. Lucky enough to see one of the penultimate space shuttles take off. It was incredible. Venice. Travel photography. Oh wow. So this is, well, let's see whether you can guess what it is. Give you a couple of seconds. It actually did well in a science competition. It was picked as one of the pictures for a calendar in New Scientist magazine, I think. And to give you a clue, it appeared in November's calendar. It's a long exposure of a firework. Complete fluke, really. For about 20 years, 18 years, I lived in Cambridge. And Cambridge is a fantastic place to photograph. Now, as is always the case, when you're somewhere for a long time, you probably yearn for a different outlook. We live right by the coast here, and of course right now that we're under sort of restricted movement, I can't get out to any woodland or anything. Now we have a beautiful coastline, but I'd love to be beside a woodland as well. And Cambridge was very much like that. You know, if I think back at the time, I used to get quite frustrated that it was Cambridge and it wasn't kind of, out in nature. Yes, I could go out and drive and go visit, but Cambridge really was on my back doorstep. But having looked back in some of the conditions, and in fact, go and check out a Cambridge diary. Martin Power, a street photographer, absolutely fantastic. He's been taking one image a day, or at least posting one image a day from Cambridge for the last, I want to say 10 years maybe. Maybe a bit less, but I'll put a link below. Fantastic. Anyway, we used to get some really, really atmospheric conditions in Cambridge, and I think this was one of the first images that I took where I started to realize what mist and fog could do to an image. Before that, I hadn't really given the elements too much of a consideration. This again is probably 2008. This is one of the bridges over the River Cam in Cambridge. And speaking of kind of atmospheric Cambridge images, I think this was probably one of my first street images that I took, and probably to date is probably one of my favourite. Again, that sort of misty, sort of I don't know, kind of Clinton Cards type view. Again, I think this, back in the day, I was quite keen on the camera clubs, and I think this did quite well. Of course, looking back at it now, I think there's a number of things that I would have liked to have done differently, but I still think it's quite a nice street image from Cambridge again. Speaking of street, this is again a little dabble into street photography. Again, it's I think I said this in my last vlog, what looking back over the history has really shown me is just how much in those early days that I was willing to kind of dabble, not just sort of stick to one genre. Yes, I had, I'll come to talk about this here, I had a couple of different genres that at various times were taking up most of my time, but I still took time to dabble, and I think that's a very important lesson. The only lesson perhaps I'd like you to take away from this, if as we get more focused on one particular genre, we can quite often shun others. But I really do enjoy doing a little bit of street photography, and again, it's just looking for kind of shapes. We had a couple of different locations. This one down the right hand corner, just that lovely shaft of light coming in, just playing with shadows and stuff. So yeah, bit of street photography. I even tried my hand at portraiture. Now this was one that I wasn't that happy with, that sort of keen on, but again, as part of the camera club outings, we would sometimes get into a studio and play about with off-camera flash and do a little bit of portraiture work. So yeah, dabbling again. And of course that actually led to some of my friends and family asking me, oh, you've got a camera, do you fancy doing our wedding? And for a couple of years I actually commercially did a number of weddings. Now I enjoyed doing them. I got some very nice feedback, but I realized that my heart wasn't really in them, and more so than anything else, I felt like I was taking a job from someone who was doing wedding photography full time. But yeah, I enjoyed doing it. I really did then have an extra appreciation for wedding photographers when kind of they're trying to get the shot, and great uncle Bulgaria is bringing up his 1980s film camera, asking him what's going on with this, and you're trying to be polite while also telling him to bugger off. But yeah, did a little bit of wedding photography as well. At the time, I was also linking up a little bit with the folks at the BBC in Cambridgeshire, and I was starting to do some jobs for them. When they were having sort of an opening going on, or just some editorial sort of news work. And that actually one of my sort of biggest jobs of the year for them, and this went on for probably 5 years or so, was shooting a lot of music festivals in and around the Cambridgeshire area, including where these 6 images are taken from over a number of years, the Cambridge Folk Festival. And that was one genre of kind of people photography that I really enjoyed. I quite like live music, and so sort of going along and shooting that was kind of a privilege. And as I say, I was sort of doing it initially for the BBC, and then I got a couple of gigs with some other specific music magazines and things, shooting sort of mostly the Cambridge Folk Festival, but then for the BBC some other festivals as well. Imelda May, fantastic. We saw someone to shoot C6 Steve, fantastic. Speaking of bands, I actually was also commissioned to do a couple of sort of music band portraitures for albums and for their own sort of marketing material. This is one here, just a little bit of fun that kind of I think worked out quite well on the streets of Cambridge. Machine Shed, this band was called. So yeah, just we had a couple of days in and around Cambridge doing some sort of portrait work, and then looking to do something for sort of some upcoming album covers. This was a kind of a double exposure, an image of the guys themselves with sort of a little nod to sort of the Cambridge bicycle scene, and then a second exposure with sort of a slightly longer shutter speed overlaid in Photoshop, and another little pair of Converse down there. Probably my favourite genre of image to shoot, and this came from a long-standing love of all things wild, was shooting wildlife. And I remember the first time shooting photographing something that I'd never seen before in the wild, and that was the kingfisher. Having it sort of just land on the sort of little stick outside the hide and photograph it. In fact, what was quite funny was I kind of wandered into the hide, and the kingfisher flew down about 10 minutes later, and I shot a bunch of frames and it flew off again, and I thought, wow, pretty easy, this kingfisher photography malarkey. and then didn't see the kingfisher again for about 6 months. But yeah, this was probably one of those first images that I went, wow, not only can I get my fix of wildlife watching, but actually photographing wildlife as well is just fantastic. Yeah, upgraded a little bit from the kingfisher. This is a white-tailed seagull in Scotland. A chap sort of feeds them during the summer season. Really good. In fact, this was probably, I think, one of his first seasons that he was doing it, so it was still quite. Now you get lots of images like this because he's so successful with sort of having the seagulls come down. But I think this was one of his first seasons, so obviously getting a shot like this back then, I think this is again probably 2010, 2011. It was just fantastic to both see and then have a little memory of that to look back on. Beautiful birds. And since then, we've been back up in Scotland many times and have witnessed some phenomenal experiences with both white-tailed seagulls and golden eagles as well. Just fantastic. If you get a chance, once this is all over, get yourself up to somewhere like the Isle of Mull. The wildlife up there is just beautiful. This image actually got commended in the British Wildlife Photography Awards way back in the day, and it was part of kind of an ongoing series that I was shooting down in the Cambridgeshire Fens of roe deer. And I just love I think I've said this in some vlogs before, I love blues and golds in an image, and this with that sort of real cold hoarfrost on the grass, and then just that lovely early morning light illuminating the roe deer as it kind of leaps up through the field. Just beautiful place to photograph first thing in the morning, especially a really frosty morning. The old water vole. Actually almost gave myself hypothermia taking this image. 7 hours of sitting in water that was pretty much, you were sitting on kind of a little sort of wooden stool thing, and water up around your ass basically. But 7 hours sitting in the water and about a minute of water vole time. But so glad I managed to sort of get a little image of little water vole kind of coming out of the pipe. Football. So, played football for many years. And in fact, the photograph on the left was the club I played for in Cambridge, Fulbourn. And once I had hung up my boots, so to speak, or basically sent out to pasture, as they do with old donkeys, I started to take my camera around on a Saturday and just photograph the reserves and the first team. And at the time, I only had my 70-200, but with the wildlife photography kind of really picking up, I'd also invested in a 400mm lens. Quite an investment that was. And so kind of every Saturday I was around shooting my local club. And then I thought I would chance my arm and go down and ask the local sort of semi-pro team at the time, Cambridge United, now at the time they were in the non-league, whether I could photograph them, and of course they could have the images for their own sort of marketing material. I just was trying to get some experience built up. And so it was kind of the end of the season, 2 or 3 games before the end of the season. So I shot those, sent in the images, and then over the summer didn't really think anything of it. Got a phone call about a few weeks before the start of the season from Cambridge United saying, look, our long-time club photographer has retired. Would you like to come down and do it? And I was like, yeah, why not? And so for about 4 years, I sort of shot Cambridge United. I did a little bit of work for one of the local rags as well, for Histon and Cambridge City as well. But yeah, shooting Cambridge United. And that kind of grounding then allowed me then to approach an agency and start working for an agency. And to cut a long story short, for sort of about 8 years, sports photography was my main source of income. This is Norwich City against Southampton on quite a snowy day at Carrow Road. Being based in Cambridge, I covered kind of North London clubs, the Arsenal, Spurs, QPR, Chelsea, but also Norwich, Ipswich, teams like that. And I absolutely loved it. I loved not only the challenge of it, but also the whole concept, the whole just being around all the sort of some photographers who I've stayed in touch with as well, some guys who have been in the industry for 20, 30 years, absolute masters of their craft. I absolutely loved it. And one of the sort of biggest downside from sort of relocating back over to Ireland for sort of personal reasons was, unfortunately, I had to put the sports camera down. And that will always be, even though we made the move over here for the right decisions, that will always be a decision from that perspective that I will regret forever, I think. I absolutely loved doing the sports photography. Obviously over in Ireland, there was still a chance to do some sports photography, not least the big sort of road motorbike race, the Northwest 200, which actually goes right by our flat, as is Michael Dunlop doing his normal sort of right to the hilt, coming up towards Blackrock, right outside our flat. So, but yeah, really missed the football photography. And so that brings us kind of full circle, back shooting landscapes again. I think landscapes were certainly the first genre that I shot way back in sort of 2006. And I kind of came full circle. And these last three images are just a little bit of a kind of synopsis of that. I think one of the parts of landscape photography that I enjoy most is the more intimate shot, and hopefully that has maybe come out in some of the vlogs that you have watched over the months. And this is just sort of when that little sort of moment went off, that it didn't have to be about everything. You know, as much as I loved back in those early days shooting with the wide angle lens, much more at home now, picking out little details, either little details up close or using a longer lens to just pick out little details in the frame. It wasn't all about epic sunrises and sort of eye-bursting sunsets. I think this was one of those images that I kind of looked at and went, you know what, even though there's nothing sort of dramatic about it, I just loved the soft light, and again just those elements of mist and fog in the background, just showing me that, again, back in 2006 when I first picked up the camera, you know, I was out shooting. I must point my camera directly at the sun, right into the center of it, because that's what photography is all about. You know, I soon became to realize that actually I much more enjoy shooting the quieter scene. Although having said that, still probably one of my favorite images from Cambridge. We didn't get a huge amount of hoarfrost, especially in the city centre, and this was one of those times, and thankfully the porters of the college kind of played ball and stood on the bridge and just allowed me to pick up quite a nice little scene from my time in Cambridge. So there you have it, a little bit of a history lesson. And again, as I've said before, the main thing that I myself have kind of pulled out of this is just how much I dabbled back on those early days compared with now. And that no more has been brought home to me at a time like this, when we're all hunkered down inside, not able to make more images. I don't have a huge back catalogue of images to go back over these last 3-4 years. Probably with the iPhone I do, because I'm always kind of snapping with the iPhone, but I don't have a huge amount of back catalogue with my main cameras, whereas back in the day I'd be kind of shooting everything. And that's one thing that I really want to challenge myself to do more as we get let back outside to play. Shoot more. Don't just wait for the perfect conditions. Don't just shoot landscape. Landscape work will always be my sort of passion going forward, I think, but kind of challenge myself to shoot a lot more different genres, not least just to kind of, just have something to look back on in maybe another 10 years time as well. And I would sort of encourage you as well to do that, to try to shoot more than just the genres that you're more familiar with. And of course right now we're probably all out shooting smoke inside and bubbles and all kinds of rubbish. Anyway guys, sorry I've rattled on a little bit too long. We'll wrap this one up, and we'll catch up at some point in the not too distant future. As always, stay safe. Catch up soon. Bye bye.